why don't we have a station that caters for colored community?
There has been a number of petitions. You have a market, you respond to that market through a format, isn't it?
We don't have a lot of colored presenters in mainstream radio stations.
RSG was trying to cater for everybody who can speak and understand Afrikaans.
Because he has over 7.5 million.
Yes.
Info of over 4.5 million.
Yes.
Metro 4. Yet, they make less money than Jacaranda.
I would prefer that there should be an advertising ombudsman. Audiences of some radio stations do not have the same value as audiences of other radio stations.
But who makes that determination? Zoli Mapipa, good afternoon and welcome to the Media Pod.
A very good afternoon to you, Chris. It's been a while since we met.
It's been a while. Mapipa, tell us briefly about yourself, your upbringing, where you grew up and family.
I grew up in the Eastern Cape, from the dusty streets of Ngangelizwe, which is the township of Umtata. Now, Umtata is a very small town. You might miss it if you blink when you're driving from Durban to East London.
Yeah.
You might miss it, but that's where I grew up. And that has been my hometown. And but I believe that I'm a citizen of South Africa.
Yes.
You know, I've been all over South Africa. You know, studying. Working.
Yes.
So yes, that's where I grew up.
When and how did you get into broadcasting?
Look, I had always been very interested in communications. I was reading books. I mean, people of my age, they knew the people, the writers like James Hadley Chase.
Yes.
Is it Alistair, something like that. He wrote a lot of books.
Yes.
Some of them were turned into film. Like Where Eagles Dare. So I'd always been interested, and but I must say I never thought of it as a career. To be honest, during our times. You were thinking of being a doctor, you were thinking of being a lawyer, you were thinking or a teacher, and but lo and behold, I found myself working in the media. It happened because I studied media communication science at University of Zululand, and my other major was speech and drama at University of Zululand as well. So then I went to Rhodes University to do honors degree at Rhodes University. Then I needed a bursary, and there were quite a number of people who were doing, journalism there, and they got bursaries from Sky government, you name it. Then I decided to write a letter to Radio Transkei. I said, look, I'm already doing honors at Rhodes University. Please give me a bursary. And that's how I got into radio.
What was your first role in radio?
Because I had studied speech and drama, so I joined as a drama producer, which was something very, very close to my heart. When I was at Rhodes, I met, there was this lecturer, Don Pinnock, a very, very smart and very politically sound person. He exposed me into how media actually, as well as drama, theater, can actually change society. So when I worked with him, it's interestingly, didn't have that much of like for drama, for instance. He viewed people who were doing drama, as people who wanted to be stars and all of that and all of that. Then when we began to talk, he said to me, you know what? You can actually make a difference if you use drama, in terms of changing society. Remember then we were still under apartheid. That was in 1986 when I was at Rhodes. And he opened my eyes. I mean, he because I was the only one actually doing this course, which was Third World Media.
Yes.
I was the only one. So I would just attend. It used to be me and her and him, and he used to have another lecturer. I think it was Lynette. Yeah, I think it was Lynette. They would conduct my class, the class that I was in, the two of them sometimes. Then he exposed me to people like Augusta Bowl, who was a well-known, theater practitioner in South America, who used theater to change society, which was almost the same thing which was happening in South Africa, where there was one section of the population being oppressed by the other section of the population. And he also exposed me to Paulo Freire. One of his books is Cultural Action for Freedom. And, he said to me, look, you are in a very, very good space. You can actually change society. So when I joined Radio Transkei, believe you me, I really enjoyed being in the drama department, because then I remember the radio dramas that were being written. It used to be radio dramas that had to do with witchcraft, all of those things, Then when I got there, I held a kind of a conference with the writers to say, what do you think is wrong with our society, or what do you think of our society as it is, and what do you think the role of writing radio dramas should be? And then we started, coming out with ideas in terms of how radio drama can actually change society, so that people now don't just listen to radio dramas for isbogi, witchcraft and all of those things. It was drama that was written specifically to change society. Now, one of the most popular radio dramas that was played at Radio Transkei was called Izithwalandwe. Izithwalandwe, as you know now, Izithwalandwe, it's the ANC uses Izithwalandwe, it confers Izithwalandwe to a person who has contributed to society.
And the struggle
into the struggle as well. So it was written by a gentleman by Mfenyane, and his brother was in exile, by the way. So he wrote that radio drama. It started in 1652, but he didn't call the Afrikaners.
Yes.
They were called, let me just think, what were they called? Amakushe, So it was a very nice, it was a very nice way of putting things which were political then, but you gave different names, to different aspects of the radio drama. But people who were listening to the drama, they knew that it was a drama about South Africa. It was about the Africans being conquered, by a foreign power, and people, trying to struggle, trying to do everything as a struggle against that. And I remember that first number of episodes, I think it was about 40 episodes. It dealt with the subjugation of South Africa from 1652 up to the Rivonia trial. And it was a very, very powerful. And when we did the Rivonia trial, of course, we didn't do it as Rivonia trial.
Yes.
We had to coach it. It was amazing.
Then, who was the station manager at Radio Transkei?
It was Mr. Ntloko. He used to be a journalist, I think. Yes, he had worked with Abon, Mr. Sisulu. His name was, I think, Donald Skalangai Ntloko. Yes.
How was the drama received? Because it was during apartheid, I want to believe.
Look, it was received very well because people knew what the drama was about. They actually knew what it was about. And I mean, there are other dramas that were written, like, for instance, at Mhlobo Enene, then it was Radio Xhosa. At Ukhozi, then it was Radio Zulu, which were coached, so that, you don't give the exact names of who the people are or what you are referring to. But the good thing, it has always shown that audiences think for themselves. You don't have to tell them, but as long as you give them the content, they will, believe you me, they will interpret it exactly the way that it is. So the audiences were quite fascinated. They were happy because now it was a change. It was a different kind of themes that were dealt with since I arrived, because they had been used to dramas that were just talking about, witchcraft or love stories and all of that. Now we began to infuse the problems of society so that people begin to think about their lives in the context of the political situation at that time.
Having produced radio dramas because you needed to be creative, how much did that assist you to become what you became in radio space?
I must say I was at home because I had studied drama for 4 years. Look, I had done it as a junior degree for 3 years and at honors level. But what really gave me I would say, jet fuel in terms of radio was a trip that I took to the US. I spent 6 weeks in the US, and I was observing. I went there through USTTI. I think it's United States Technology something Institute. So I visited several radio stations, commercial radio stations, across. We started in Washington DC. Then we went to Dallas. Then we went to Mississippi. And then we went back to Philadelphia. So I was studying, understanding, working in different radio stations, with the station managers of different radio stations, which was quite exciting.
Let's just spend some time on writing, because you did communicational science.
Yes.
Do you think writing for the ear and writing for the eye is different?
Of course it is different. Of course it's different because it's about the language that you use. You paint, whatever people can visualize, you paint it in words, and it actually engages the audiences. Because remember, you're not feeding them. You get them to think for themselves. So that is why radio is called the theater of the mind, because you engage the person as they are listening. They are also actively participating by thinking and engaging with the content and painting pictures in themselves with what you give them in terms of words. Of course, writing will be different for visual television, be it television, film, or now these days for internet. If it's visual, so it's different because the pictures are there.
You just add color.
Exactly.
So from radio production, where did you go?
Then then I managed the programming from radio production, and incidentally, my department, when was it? Was it 1990? I think it won the department of the year, which was the drama department. It won the department of the year. So I guess it was no surprise that in 1992, I became the programs manager.
Did you enjoy that role?
Yes, because now I was able to implement all those things that I was exposed to. I remember when I started as the programs manager, the presenters you would do a snippet between 6 and 9, or between, let's say, 5 and 9 in the morning. Tomorrow you come in, you do a different show altogether. The other day you do a different show altogether. So presenters would just come in and do a snippet, and then, today, tomorrow, different one. So when I joined, I knew that with public service radio, it had never been done. But I felt, why not? So I introduced appointment listening. So I had Saba doing, the Saba.
Yes.
Saba was quite popular. I had Saba doing an 8 to, I changed them. I didn't want to do it as 6 to 9, 9 to 12, 12 to 3. I can't remember what it was that made me actually start from 5 to 8 and then 8 to 11, but every show, every presenter had an appointment with the listeners. Now they knew that they were going to listen to Saba Mbipani from 8 to 11. They knew that they were going to listen to the mid-morning show from 11 to 1, I think 11 to 1. I can't remember exactly. So I introduced the appointment listening in public service radio, which was the station, and I even advised my colleagues when I came to the SABC and joined Metro. We used to have meetings with the public service radio managers, and I used to I did actually advise them that I think it's high time that you change what you are doing and have appointment listening, and ultimately they did.
Thank you for watching. We still continue with Zoli Mapipa. There's a gray area between the responsibilities of a programs manager and the station manager. Oftentimes, there's cross-interference. Briefly, how would you explain the roles of the PM and the roles of the station manager?
Look, it's a tricky one. It also depends. Let me put it that way. It also depends on the structure. Classically, the programs manager is responsible for what goes on air, right? But remember, I'm gonna make an example with the SABC. There was a time at the SABC when the station managers were more of program managers than station managers. But you're quite right. There is a difference. That the programs manager, in my view, makes sure and is responsible for the product, and the station manager is responsible for the business side of a radio station. But like I'm saying, it also depends on the structure of an entity, because at the SABC, as I said, there were those times when there was a time when the station managers were doubling up as program managers, and the reason, one of the reasons was because most of the station managers had come from being presenters.
True.
Now, because they know what is happening in terms of programming, they would lean towards, interfering, as you are saying, interfering when it comes to programming. However, there's also another issue. I remember when I was a group programs manager at the SABC, so the programs manager, and I was working with the programs managers across 15 radio stations. So we were responsible for what goes on air. Now, there was this one time when the programs manager was not happy with one of the presenters, and then he wanted to fire the presenter, right? And the station manager said, no, you can't fire him. So he appealed to me, right?
Yes.
And said, the station manager is interfering. I want to fire this guy because he did this. Then I said to him, look, I know you are responsible for programming, and presenters are part of your responsibility. However, if the impact of your decision goes beyond programming, then the station manager has to step in.
Especially if it affects business.
Exactly. Now the issue is that he's not overstepping his boundaries as the station manager. He is guarding against the interest of the brand now as a whole. So there are those issues, that one can feel that it's interference, but unfortunately, if it affects the entire brand, then it's no longer it's not an interference. Yes, I agree. If the station manager, begins to interfere in terms of programming, in terms of maybe the lineup or something like that. But also, even then, let's not forget that when you say it's interference, what is the percentage of the things that the station manager wants to change? If it's 1%, in my
Give
view,
and take.
just we're talking about a relationship here. We're talking about a relationship here. I'll tell you why. For instance, because I remember it was at Radio Transkei. So I felt that we needed to interview, or we needed to have in a talk show, this particular individual. So as a programs manager, yes. So I went to the person responsible for the show. I said, look, let's have this. And then the person said, no, it can't happen. So but I said, no, it has to happen, because this person, I think there was a limited time in which this person was available for being interviewed.
True.
So I knew that the presenter was not happy with it. But I said, look, unfortunately, we have to do it, How many times do I come to you to say, let's do this? Out of 52 weeks, and about 200 and something days, Monday to Friday, I've only come to you about 3 days,
It's not asking for too much.
That's not too much.
Zoli Mapipa, you were credited for the introduction of clock system and the producers in the early 2000s. Can you give us a breakdown of what was the thinking behind that?
Right. Look, if we talk of radio, we are talking of airtime, right? So that is what the business is about. It's about the use of airtime on air. Now, unless you find a way in which you account for each and every second, you could be misallocating time. And until you have a scientific way of managing that time, you will not know what happened where. So there must be a system in which you know that from such and such a time to such and such a time, and there must be consistency. From such and such a time to such and such a time, this is what I did. So that by the time you get the feedback from audiences, if there's a problem, you are able to fix it. But if in your shows they vary every minute, every hour, there is no consistency, then you will not know how your audiences receive the product that you give them. And you need to allocate time and be consistent about it. Like, for instance, I'll make you an example. If you have the news at the top of the hour, then you are consistent to say it's either audiences don't like the news at the top of the hour or they like it. And you must be consistent to say, for this particular radio station, the news will be 3 minutes. And be consistent about that, so that you know that your audiences, if they tune out, then you know what is the tune out factor. So that is how the clock system works. It divides the hour. First of all, it allocates your hour, your minutes, your seconds in an hour to predetermined content. You say, I will give so much time in an hour to this kind of content. As an example, music versus talk, you know? Features, all of those. Then you know exactly how much you are then able to leverage and change some of those things depending on the outcome of the audience research. So that's how, for me, that's how clocks are important. And they also determine what the presenter must do. They also determine what the producer must bring into the show. Because then you are able to know, if for instance, you've got a feature on, let's say you've got a feature on beauty, for argument's sake. If it's always at the same time, and people tune in or tune out, then you know that when they tune in, it's because they like it. When they tune out, it's because they don't like it.
Apart from discipline on air, would you say the clock assists with revenue making aspect for a radio station?
It does, and it's also used in television. They call it hammocking, right? Where you use it as part of a strategy, a programming strategy. If you know, as an example, I mean, in our case, stations have got licenses, right?
Yes.
So not everything that is in the license appeals to everybody,
True.
right?
Especially PBS.
Exactly, especially PBS. So you know then that when you're going to put a particular aspect of your programming that doesn't have a high appeal with audiences, what you do before it or after it, you put in your clock, you put in an aspect that you know will draw audiences, like for instance a hit song. Okay, so it does assist not only in terms of, but before it even assists in terms of revenue, it assists in terms of audience retention, bringing in audiences as well as retaining those audiences. For instance, the throw forward. The throw forward is
Eclipse.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's done because you know that in between there's gonna be an aspect that people might not be very keen on, but after that they know that there's gonna be a Brenda Fassie weekend special that is coming on. Then when it comes to now revenue, then the advertisers, they know that you are looking well after your product. You want to make it a point that you've got your time spent listening, you've got your your accumulation, you've got strategies to accumulate your audiences, and also you get your audiences to spend more time listening to your radio station. An example, which is what you mentioned, is that there's a perception, which is probably true. Researchers say people listen for 15 minutes, right? And thereafter they tune out. So what do you do in order to take your audiences that were listening in the first quarter hour to the second quarter hour? So then you use those strategies of the clock to say, I will have a power song starting from, an example, from 12 minutes past the hour to 17 minutes past the hour. And if that person has been listening now from the previous quarter hour to the next quarter hour, then they are counted on both quarter hours. So your advertisers are happy with that because they realize that you know exactly how to make audiences stick to your show.
Is there any scientific reason as to why stations that are attracting high time spent listening are not increasing their audience frequently?
Look, I don't remember that also. It also depends on the lifestyle of the audiences.
Yes.
Because some audiences, particularly the audiences that work, they may not have the time to be listening to the radio for a very long time. They might listen during drive time, just for those times. But other radio stations, like PBS, you'd find that the people are not gamely engaged in terms of working. So they have longer time to listen to the radio, and you'd find that, which is what is the case in our case in South Africa, is that there are more people who listen to public service radio. They listen for longer hours, time in terms of time spent listening. Yes. But with commercial radio,
in and out.
It's in and out. And also,
because obviously the audience is very young.
The audience is young.
Got a lot of options.
Yeah, but remember that the audience can be old, like adult contemporary.
Okay,
yes.
AC.
But the thing is, they've got, because they are gamely employed, they've got other things to do. And they also have other sources of information. They've also got other sources of entertainment. They are connected to internet.
Social media.
They are connected to social media. They are connected to they have
options.
They've got options, yes. Or some of them, it may not even be media. They are doing other things.
True.
Exactly.
You worked with Chomani, and I mentioned in Chomani on Purpose.
Yes.
Mama Kamasi at Umhlobo.
Yes.
And Dudu Koza Lady at Ukozi.
At Ukozi, yes.
Why do you think these three presenters, as old as they were while they are on air, Lady is still on air, why do you think they were attracting revenue and also attracting audience?
Look, I think let me phrase it this way. there is also a kind of where depending on how the presenter speaks, the connection of the presenter with the audiences, it can draw, or it does draw, audiences to the presenter and to the station. And I don't think for one reason, Chris, to say, sometimes it has something to do with age, but sometimes it has got nothing to do with age. There is this thing called talent when it comes to speaking.
Whether young or old.
Whether young or old, there are people who are just a magnet when it comes to audiences. I mean, like, you haven't mentioned Tusom Down, but he's one of those people. They just have that particular way in which they speak, and they resonate with the audiences. Now I'm not sure. There are a lot of things when it comes to revenue. Believe you me, there are a lot of things when it comes to revenue, because there are more stakeholders when it comes to revenue. Because remember, now there's somebody else who must now go and sell this person to advertising agencies. And advertising agencies have got a different mindset altogether. They have a different mindset. And sometimes it's unjustifiable, that I must say. Sometimes it's unjustifiable how they think in terms of where they have to spend the money. I'll make you, let me explain what I'm saying about that. Some advertising agencies will say, no, we will not book with a particular person, even though they are very, very popular. Simply because they themselves do not listen to that kind of radio station. Now you see where
it's a matter of preference, not content delivery.
Exactly. It's a matter of preference. It's not a matter of audiences, because let's remember, their job as advertisers is to expose the brands that they represent to audiences. Not to decide that, no, we're not going to put our advertising at that particular station, even though that particular radio station has got audiences. And I'm saying this specifically, Chris, because there are stations that have got loads and loads of audiences, but they don't make as much money as other stations that have got fewer audiences.
Let's talk about that. And I'm glad that you have raised that, because we are going to discuss that and dissect it. Ukhozi has over 7.5 million.
Yes.
Improv over 4.5 million.
Yes.
Metro 4. Yet, they make less money than Jacaranda.
Yes.
Which has just over 1 million listeners.
Exactly.
They make less money than 947. Could it be because of the preference, not based on any scientific evidence to say, Ukhozi, they may be in KZN, for instance, but in Gauteng, they're in the top 10. Lesedi, they may have 3.5 million listeners, but in Gauteng, they are doing very well. So it means these two stations, including Metro, in terms of the economic hub of the country, which is Gauteng, they are penetrating this province. So why would advertisers not want to spend as much as they spend on Jacaranda, on 702, on 947 and other commercial stations? Or is it a question of impact, which is based on regionality, because their audience respond quicker because they are within the reach?
It's a very complex thing. And this is why I would prefer that there should be a an advertising ombudsman in the South African context? Because the explanation is that audiences of some radio stations do not have the same value as audiences of other radio stations.
But who makes that determination?
I'm going to agree with you, because in, I think, early the turn of the century, 2000, there's a research that was done in the Western Cape. I'm not sure whether it was done at Stellenbosch or University of Western Cape, but it was done in the Cape, which showed that the take home of black South Africans, that includes Africans, South Africans of Indian origin, South African of the colored community, combined, their money that they take home superseded in 2000, superseded that of their white compatriots. So that means black stations now are broadcasting to audiences who have money, right? However, in some defense, they will say that, look, there is more money with these audiences. But the other thing is, one has to compare the brands exactly that are being advertised on a station that has got fewer audiences, but and a station that has got a bulk of audiences. If, for instance, they are selling, for me, if they are selling a product that is accessible to everybody, why then would that make more money? Why then would they make more money with the smaller stations than the stations that have got huge audiences? What I'm trying to say is, if it's bread, a station that has got 1 million audiences versus a station that has got 7 million audiences, where is return on investment more for a brand like bread? Definitely, it's from a station which has got 7.8 million, because it means that 7.8 million people will eat the bread. So it's a very complex issue, which can go to one thing. Maybe it's the rates. The advertising rates of the small stations are high, but the advertising rates of the big stations are low. So you can buy 50 spots on Ukos and reach that 7.8 million and make so much money. But with a station that has got smaller audiences, you buy, let's say, 50 spots, but at a price which is 10 times more than that one of Ukos. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say.
I do, but then you should blame the stations, right?
See now.
now that we blame stations, let's take Ukozi out of the equation, right?
Yes.
Because there are one spot on Ukozi in their breakfast show is just below 20,000 a spot, excluding production costs and loading and all those. But one spot on Metro, it's just above 30,000. Above 30,000. Same as 947.
Yes.
But at the same time, 947 has a fraction of what Metro has. Metro has over 4 million. 947 has just over 1 million. But 947 is even making more money than a station which has footprint in all metros. How then do we justify that?
Even more. When I left Metro, in 1997, Metro was making, had reached 100 million, right?
Yes.
Now, the station that you mentioned was at about 50 million. Fast forward to 2025. Metro, I don't know how much they are making now. Probably making 800 million.
Close to 850, 900.
But the other station is making over a billion. What happened between that time and now? Because that station was making half of what Metro was making in 1997.
Is it the business models?
I don't know. That is why I'm saying we need in South Africa a advertising ombudsman, where that ombudsman must look at, are we sure that advertisers pay the correct amount at station A and the correct amount at station B? I think there needs to be an intervention in that part, because otherwise, honestly, the majority of black stations will never see the light of day.
Do you think it's racially motivated?
I don't know.
But do you think so?
No, I don't know. It may not be. It may be that the stations that are under a particular group, which is those stations that left the SABC, if you remember.
Those stations that SABC sold.
That's those stations.
The 5 stations that SABC sold, 96.
That rape billions and billions. And everybody else, including new stations like the new licenses,
Greenfield licenses,
community radio stations, public radio stations, they have to share one third of the budget of advertising in South Africa. Whilst those few stations, they take about 66%, which is 2/3. And when it comes to audiences, other stations command more than 80% of audience share.
I think SABC commands at least 27 million market share.
Yes.
In terms of numbers, 27 million.
In terms of numbers, but 70-something percent. Now include the greenfields, include the community radio stations in that, and it's about.
But that 77 does not translate into revenue.
It's about 80% of this group, and then 20% of this group. Yet this group get about.
Currently, Zoli Mapipa, I think it's only 2 stations in the country who have over 1 million in their drives. Only BEP on Umhlobo has over 1 million. The rest of the shows, they are clocking below 1 million. Ukhozi, number of shows are over 1 million. Do you think other stations would ever catch up in terms of the audience?
Yeah, it's a very. I think it will be a tall order, if you ask me. Let's look at the plethora of media out there, and the fact that do you really need a million, audiences here in the breakfast show right through? I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's possible to increase the audiences, but I'd love to see them do it. That would be fantastic, eh? Doing it. Remember also that it's also a numbers game. People who speak and understand isiZulu are more than 12 million, isn't it?
True.
About 12 to 15 million. Yeah. True. So you can't really compare other stations. I mean, with Igwegwezi, for instance, the population of their first language speakers is smaller
in comparison to the Nguni,
in
other Nguni languages.
Audiences. So I don't think it's possible for other stations.
Do you think Maskandi and gospel play a key role in terms of those two stations, because they are very big on gospel and Maskandi? They don't compromise when it comes to those two genres of music.
It could be, but also the news and current affairs, they drive audiences with those stations. They really drive audiences with those stations.
How so?
Because of the numbers. I mean, with the numbers. I mean, I don't know now, but they used to be high in terms of numbers when it comes to current affairs. So what I'm saying is not only the particular genre of music. Of course, one has to understand the audiences and play the music that will resonate with the audiences. But I'm saying there are other genres, or there are other genres within the programming mix, like drama, for instance. Dramas are quite popular when it comes to
other mandate features as well.
Yes, and other mandate features as well.
In terms of the national footprint, we've got SAFM, RSG, and Radio 2000. I think there are only 3 stations nationally which have national footprint. You can access them every corner in the country.
With Metro being on metropolitan.
Yes. But why are these stations struggling in terms of numbers? Because unlike the PBS stations, because it's predominantly big in KZN, Gauteng, a little bit in Free State, but these 3 stations, every corner in the SA, you find them, but in terms of numbers, they don't.
It goes back to their pool. Where do they draw their audiences from? SAFM, it's in English. It's the high end of the audiences. How many are they in South Africa? And the competition within that space. 2000 actually is improving. I mean, right now, 2000, I think it's over 2 million.
2 million, yes.
So it is picking up, and it's the kind of music that they play. It's the kind of music that they play. RSG it's drawing from a very small base. I mean, how many, if you look at the census, how many African-speaking people in South Africa?
Very small number.
Yeah.
Extremely small.
Yeah.
But then, why would they have transmitters everywhere? Because those transmitters are costly. Constitutionally, you cannot deny people radio. People need to access radio. You cannot switch it off on any basis. But they spend half of their budget towards Centec, towards transmitters.
Look, first of all, I think it's historical. Secondly, you've just mentioned that according to the Constitution, each and every citizen must have access to information. So that this means then we have to go back to the mandate of a public service broadcaster. The mandate of the public service broadcaster is to make sure that all the citizens have got access to information. So now, coupled with the historical fact, by the way, it's not the only one. Umhlobo wenene is in probably 7 provinces. Yet, it's outstripped when it comes to numbers. I think there was a time when there were more people, moving from Umhlobo to other provinces. And I think it's like that. You'll find people from the Eastern Cape in Western Cape, in Free State, in Gauteng, in KZN, So I don't know. I'll be honest, I can't give an answer to that. But also, remember, in terms of numbers, I just said that in terms of the population of the first language speakers and understanding of isiZulu, it's about 15 million, 12 to 15 million. And Umhlobo, Xhosa-speaking people and Xhosa-speaking people are about 10 million. So you can see why. But in terms of the transmitters, I think it's more historical than anything.
Zoli Mapipa, you left Radio Transkei, you joined Metro. In what capacity were you joining Metro, and what happened thereafter?
I joined as station manager. Now, remember that I spoke about the structures.
Yes.
So at that time, the station manager was more inclined towards managing the programming
Yes.
of the station, and it was a good stint. I stayed for 2 years at Metro, and I began to be able to implement my exposure in the US
Yes.
quite well, because I remember, well, first of all, I don't think there was something that was called a strategy. So
At the
time, so when I came in, that's one of the things that I did is to come up with a strategy of what Metro was about, and then introduce the clocks. That's to make sure that the station is really sounding well. And also, one of the things that we did was to make sure that the music is harnessed. Remember that at the time, people would just come in with their bags full of CDs, so we had to rein in everybody and get all the music to be played from the system, so that it creates a flow. You're a radio person. There must be a flow in a radio station.
Finish.
There must be same sound in a radio station. It mustn't be different radio stations in one, several radio stations in one. So that's one of the things that we did, was to make sure that the station sounds the same. And one of the key things that I learned from from one radio person was that if you go to a chicken, these well-known chicken outlets,
Yes.
you go there because you know that when you buy that particular brand of chicken, it tastes the same. So it is with programming, with a radio station. The station must sound the same. Yes, it must have differences in terms of pace, differences in terms of intensity, depending on
Based on the shows.
Based on the shows, but it must sound the same. It must be consistent, So that is the consistency that's what I must say I brought to Metro, is that consistency in terms of sound. And it was the turn of the political dispensation in South Africa when I joined, which was 96 and 97. So I can pride myself that at that time Metro did play a role in terms of what was happening in South Africa. And I also made it a point that I made it a music radio station. I remember when I joined Metro, it had there was a sports show in the afternoon, and you could hear ball by ball commentary.
Yes.
And I said, no. This is a music station. This must always be music. Music must be at the top of the offering of the radio station.
when you were at Metro for about 2 years.
2 years, yes.
Just after the political dispensation changed.
Yes.
And then we had YFM.
Yes.
How much impact did YFM have in how Metro sounded from where you took over from Koskhadet?
It had to. It had to. I remember I was interviewed, when YFM came and Kaya FM. Because remember, and I said it's like my analogy was like, it's like a rugby player being tackled, his legs being tackled and the top being tackled, because YFM came in and took the youth,
the urban element.
Kaya
went for the adult contemporary.
And then came with the adult. It had to change. It had to stick to its core, which was 16 to 24 as core audience, and then 35 to 49. And one of the things that I did was to change the the presenters, which was quite a controversial,
very unpopular,
which was quite unpopular.
I know exactly how that made you feel,
because it made me feel good. That I can say, because for me it was to do a job. It's a youth station, but unfortunately, because the station had been established with the presenters that it had, it kept the presenters, there at Metro. And let's be honest, people age with time, and their presentation style changes all the time. And what you do as a radio station, if your target audience, for argument's sake, is 16 to 34, you let, including the audiences, you allow them to go and explore other radio stations if they are no longer fit for your target audience. So it is with presenters. If a presenter, not all presenters, by the way, change. Some presenters, they stay young. I can tell you now, Grant Shakwane, he stayed young. He was a very exactly. So I was quite. It was a challenge. It was a challenge that one had to make a decision and say, this is a youth station. It must remain a youth station. And I think one of the key things that I said when I left, when I was leaving Metro, and I had been recruited to go and establish a radio station in Durban.
Before you talk about that,
yes,
which presenters did you recruit to Metro in your 2 years at Metro?
I promoted Ernest from, I think he was doing a morning show 3 to 6, put him prime time, and then I took
this is Ernest Pillay.
Ernest Pillay, yes.
Nimzana.
Yes. And then I took the other person that I recruited straight from outside Metro was Mafuta James,
Kenny Maestri.
Kenny Maestri, yes, Kenny Maestri. I knew Kenny when he was knew of him because I used to listen to Capital Radio, so I used to listen to him. And when Ernest left, I took Kenny to do the 12 to 3. Dixon Muller, yes, I also took.
He's now the business manager for Channel Africa.
Okay, so I took him from 5FM, from 5FM, and put him to at Metro,
And then you left. Where did you go?
And then, so when I left, there hadn't been a decision that was made exactly for the positioning of Metro. And I remember answering the question to say, it depends what the incoming manager will do, whether they will make it a youth station or an adult station, because it could have gone either way. It could have been an adult contemporary radio station with the audiences starting from 25 to 49, okay, or a youth station 16 to 34, which it is still now today. Okay, then I went to EP4 radio, which was a jazz station in Durban. Yes.
Which is P4, which is now Gagazi.
Which is now Gagazi.
And then in Western Cape, it's Hard FM.
It's Hard FM, yes. It was P4 Durban and P4 Cape Town. It was a jazz station.
How challenging that process was to start a station from scratch?
It was challenging, but I had a very good chairman of the board. He was very, very supportive. It was good, but it was soon realized that the format of the station wasn't going to yield audiences. I mean, a bulk of audiences like it is now. Now it's been changed from a jazz station to a urban contemporary radio station.
And then you came back to SABC?
No, before going back to the SABC, I went to World Space, which was a satellite radio company. It had about 65 radio stations, different formats. You know, it broadcast in the entire African continent and Middle East. You know, yeah. But that company didn't survive. The business model wasn't good for. It wouldn't survive in South Africa at that time because it was a subscription business model. Now subscription audio
ahead of time.
We were ahead of time. Yes, yes.
And then you rejoined SABC.
Then I rejoined the SABC as group programs manager for the 15 public service radio stations. And I joined, and it was exactly, you know, before I left, you remember I said I had advised some of the station managers, you know, to change in terms of the programming and the programming of the public service radio station. So when I came back, my job was to make sure that the public service radio stations are contemporary. So now we had appointment listing. It was block programming. A person comes in, does 6 to 9, 9 to 12, 12 to 3, 3 to 6, you know. And the structure had actually changed now. You had a station manager who was supposed to be running the business, and you had a programs manager. Program managers were employed now, and producers as well. And some of the contemporary things that were introduced at the time was twin presenters. You know,
a host and a co-host.
A host and a co-host.
Zoo Radio. Zoo Radio. Yeah.
A host and a co-host. You know, and it was a good innovation taken from internationally, because I mean you have one person there saying whatever they say. There are no friction points. I remember we used to speak of friction points. You know, like if it's you and me and we are presenting, you are going to come up with a different opinion,
dissenting voice.
You know, a different, you know, voice in terms of what we're talking about. So it was that, and then we introduced imaging, for instance. So
the role of technical producers.
That's when. Then, you know, after that, then the technical producers were now that was an improvement, because it started with imaging, right? Which were just put in when I started there.
Yes.
Then it improved as we sort of evolved to say, actually, these sounds and the clips and all of these, they are also good as part of the content. So there must now be technical producers who can actually produce, snippets for the radio station.
Do you think outside PBS portfolio, there is a structure of a listener migrating from Metro when they get older to 2000, and then from 2000 when they get older to SAFM, or it just happens by default?
I think there is a structure. It may not be, what I'm saying may not be scientific, but I think there is a structure in terms of how people consume any kind of media, not only radio. I think there is a structure where at a particular time in your life, you listen to this kind, at a different kind of your life, you listen to a different kind of radio station. But that does not mean that you cannot have a 50-year-old or a 60-year-old listening to 5FM.
Or even Metro.
Because a person could be young at heart, or a person could just like or could just love that kind of music.
I know this one may be a bit controversial. We have Lotus FM, which caters predominantly to the Indian community. Why don't we have a station that caters for colored community at national level?
There has been a number of petitions that came, I think, to the SABC. But, my view is you have a market, you respond to that market through a format, isn't it?
True.
Now, how do you then interview? Wouldn't it be controversial when you say, I want to interview colored people and to find out what they are looking for in a radio station? Is it something that would not be in the radio stations that are there? Or rather, you say, I want people who are keen in this kind of programming. What would make it different? You're the interviewer, and I'm sorry that I'm turning it around. What would be different to me as a colored person to you as a different person? Is it
culture, heritage, interest, things that you consume? They differ from one person to the other. Because the argument can be...
Now, is that difference in terms of individuals, or is it difference in terms of group?
Group. Because if you listen to Metro, they only have Ishmael Abrams, whom we can classify as colored. If you listen to 2000, we've got Reggie Philander. And if you focus on their shows and number of people who are calling in, most of those who are contributing to the show, because of identity and how they identify themselves, it's mainly, I'm not saying all of them are colored, but I'm just saying there's a niche that can be easily identified. Jacaranda, they've got few of them. One of them is Elena Africa, she's married now. But we don't have a lot of colored presenters in mainstream radio stations. Obviously with PBS is dealing with languages, which is your Lesedi, you need to be able to speak Sotho.
And you're touching on something very critical when you say languages. Because then
For instance, we've got XKFM in Northern Cape.
Yes.
It's catering for the Khoi and the Sons.
Yeah, and they speak different. They speak.
But their own constituency politically, if you put it in political terms.
I agree with you. They speak different languages. They speak. They speak Khoi. No, it's Tung and Gwedam.
Yes.
They speak Tung and Gwedam, and of course Afrikaans.
And in terms
personally, what I would, my personal view, né? I wouldn't say it's a colored station. I would just say this is the programming profile of this particular radio station, and get those people who are keen on that particular kind of program to listen to it. I don't think I would go to the extent of saying I may be wrong. It's a difficult question, I must say. Some people might find it sensitive to say they want it to be called that. But look, I'm not going to claim that I have an answer to that at all. It's like, I know for a fact that RSG was trying to cater for everybody who can speak and understand Afrikaans, to such an extent that there was a campaign that said "Your Master Stasi," which they thought it would appeal to the colored community. But I must be honest, it's a difficult question. I wouldn't like to try and tackle it.
Okay, sport, in my view, should be a unique selling point for SABC, because commercial stations don't really have interest in broadcasting soccer, cricket, rugby, tennis, Olympics live. At most, they feature those within their sport bulletins. Do you think SABC is taking full advantage of the fact that it's only SABC stations that can cater for their audience within this specific activity? If we've got a Rugby World Cup, you can definitely get it on SABC radio. If it's cricket, you can definitely get it on Umhlo or Kosi. If it's soccer, you get it across all stations, because none other than SABC stations is covering sport. Do you think SABC is treating sport the way they should?
Look, I think so. Remember that sometimes it's a matter of competition. If competition comes in and does something better than you, then you can change the way that you do things. But right now, I think they are, and I think in particular, remember now, there's the online, the internet. So I think they are using it quite well now, because now you can actually not only just consume sport on the SABC, on television, on radio stations, but you can also consume it on DTT and online, yes. Which is online. Well, maybe that's one aspect that maybe television could explore, because right now it's SABC Plus, né? Which is television based. Yeah. Maybe they just need to explore the online now to make sure that you can get it on the go.
True.
Yeah. And I think, I stand corrected, I think at the time that you were at 2000, there was a time when cricket was done online. Yes. So that's the kind of, yes.
I'll get my share of the cake. Do you think the community radio stations and campus stations are getting enough credit for their contribution in terms of talent development? Because almost every national radio station and television platform have presenters who come from Dax FM, who come from Hotel FM, who come from community radio stations and campus stations, do we give enough credit to these campus and community radio stations?
Look, credit, unless there was a radio portfolio, a radio portfolio for the entire South Africa, where we would say, they need to give credit. But believe you me, I think there is credit. That's enough. The fact that the public service radio stations have the community radio stations as their feeder. They take people from the community radio stations, and the fact that commercial radio stations will take presenters from RMR radio, music radio, and other campus radio stations. I think that is in itself and giving due where it's deserved, because they take that talent. Because remember also that talent themselves, they don't want to end up to grow old in a campus radio station. They've got ambitions themselves, so they want to go to the commercial radio stations. And those who are in other community radio stations, they want, when they present there, they want the station manager of Ukhozi, station manager of Lisedi FM, they want them to be listening and to be knocking on their door and saying, come and join us.
Do you think supply versus demand scenario is contributing to what we have currently? Because everyone, and rightfully so, every presenter on campus station, they want to be at 5FM, they want to be at OFM, they want to be at Algoa, rightfully so. At the same time, we don't have as many stations that can take so many of our young talent year in, year out, because it's not like every year Jacaranda would lose 10 presenters, Zedi would lose 10 presenters, Ukhozi would lose 10 presenters. But over and above that, in at least 4 provinces, apart from community radio stations, you've got Ukhozi also getting talent from Gagazi.
Not necessarily from Gagazi, but I would say there's a station in. I know what you're talking about. Yes.
At the same time, preference will always be given to True FM. In Limpopo, you've got 3 stations, Palapala, Mugana, and Tobela. And then you've got Capricorn FM,
yes,
where they can literally go and get someone there before they go to community and campus radio stations. Same as UFM in Northwest. But in the Free State, there's no one. In Northern Cape, there's no commercial stations. And right now, we are waiting for Rhythm FM to go live. We are waiting for Beat FM to go live in Free State. Do we need more commercial stations in the country?
Yes, a big yes. And I'm saying that I went to present at ICASA when there were representations in how digital sound broadcasting must be introduced in South Africa. And I took it as a challenge because the established companies like the SABC, Prime Media, you name it, Igagas, for instance, they were saying, no, new licenses must not be given out, right, when digital sound broadcasting is introduced in South Africa. And I think I presented a good case to say we need more commercial radio stations in South Africa, because some of the people who get laid off at the current at the current commercial radio stations at SABC, where do they go to? They need to go somewhere. And that is the reason why I am quite keen on other companies, other radio stations to make money in South Africa. Not just those few radio stations that we spoke about and the SABC. The money should be spread, because it doesn't only, it also adds in terms of creating livelihood for other people.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because Hot 107, those who are former presenters at Jacaranda,
Yes.
947, even 702, they get straight into Hot 107, and they are doing well financially.
You see.
They are even doing better than most SABC stations in terms of money.
You see, I will go back to that issue of ombudsman in the South African radio industry, to say, let's make it a point that the industry grows, not shrunk, and only depends and it's only based on a few actors in the industry. And I explained it to ICASA to say there's only a few, it's a duopoly, what they call duopoly, because there's just a few companies within the radio industry, and they make a killing when it comes to money. Why can't it be spread so that there are new other players in the market?
Zoli Mapipa, thank you very much for affording us an opportunity to get to understand you better, from broadcasting, where you grew up, and your contribution to the sector. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and follow. This is the Media Pod. John, among other issues that we were made aware of was you had an issue when Nikiwe Bikisha left. You wanted to be part of the negotiations for her successor.
And I never expected it would be my decision, but I did expect to be part of the conversation. The management took a different view, and I made my own decisions. I left without a job. I didn't leave to go anywhere. No, it was hugely gratifying, that people said that I'd made a contribution, that I would be missed, and people were unhappy about the idea that there might be some kind of political interference in the work of journalists at the SABC.
For someone who doesn't understand what is Afropolitan, from someone who worked there, what is Afropolitan?
I had a lot to learn, because that's not my background. The idea was to embrace the urban African population that was at the core of Kaya. Often the ad industry looks at the person who goes home and slaughters an animal in celebration or in any other context, and then they think there's another person who is interested in traveling overseas, learning about wine, learning about investing in the stock market. And he said, these are the same people, but the Afropolitan has rural roots, has traditions, looks backward, but looks backward in ways that are linked to the way they want to move forward.